Okay, welcome everybody. Uh, First of all, thank you for joining. And I'm Jay Rege, and I have with me Jyotsna Rege, and we'll be conducting today's session. If you have any questions, you can just feel free to interrupt the discussion, turn on your microphones, and ask. If you feel you would like to type in the questions in the message box, you can put it there, and then we'll read those questions and then discuss those. So feel free. I mean, I expect more questions from you because I'll be discussing all the topics, but then I'm sure you would have more questions after that. So anytime, I mean, during the discussion after the webinar, we could still take questions. But even during the webinar, if you have any questions, just feel free to interrupt and ask. Okay. For those who joined a little late, if you have any questions, as I was telling, just feel free to turn on your microphones and ask them, or you could type them in the message box. So let's begin today's discussion. Uh, Today's discussion we will cover almost all topics relevant to MS in US applications. We'll cover a little bit about the finances, visas as well. After the so our numbers are here, mine and Josna's. After the discussion, if you think you still have questions, you could WhatsApp or call us. I'm sure most of you have, have received a WhatsApp message from me, so that you have my number as well. So you could just reply on that number. That's my personal number, and you could reply on that or call me on that, and we can discuss questions if you have anything that is not being answered in this webinar today. So let's start with when you decide on applying for your MS, right? Once you start applying for your MS, what do universities look for in an applicant? I mean, this is the first step that when you start working on your MS applications, this is to give you an idea on how do you shortlist universities. I mean, that is the first thing. I mean, many students are not, have this confusion on which universities to apply to, on what criteria would the university judge my profile. So these are basically the criteria on which universities uh, decide on whether or not to admit a particular applicant. Now and this is actually in kind of in the order of importance, not exactly, but the most important factor is the GPA. Universities give a lot of importance to the GPA, or rather, when I say GPA, it is basically your academic profile. I don't specifically mean the GPA as given by the US universities, but any whatever format of the grading scale that your university follows, whether they follow a percentage or whether they follow the CGPA out of 10 or out of 4, whatever are your grades in your current academic institution, and those are the most important. That is actually the most important factor in your application. The first round of screening generally happens on the basis of GPAs and GRE scores. Now, what has happened over the past few years is that many universities, as you might know, have made GRE either optional or they have completely removed the requirement of the GRE. So, in that case, the GPA becomes even more important. Some universities, and in fact most of the top universities, also give importance to the university that you graduated from. Now they may not have a database of all possible universities in India, and so may not know exactly where how good or bad the university is from which you graduated. But there are certain universities, especially the IITs or the BITS or the NITs, and maybe some of the very popular universities, sometimes like Vellore or Manipal, which generally from where a lot of students go to these US universities, might get a little bit of preference because their university is a little well known. Although that does not mean that if you are from a university that is not very high in the ranking, you are at a big disadvantage. What I mean, the way I would put it is, if you probably are from say an NIT or a BITS and you have a say an 8.5 CGPA, I mean your cumulative CGPA is 8.5, whereas someone from a slightly lower ranked university, maybe I mean an ordinary university in India, say a Mumbai University student, right, has a 9 GPA, it could be possible that someone with a slightly lower GPA from an IIT or BITS could get admitted just because they have a very strong brand associated with them. So that is how, but doesn't mean that just because they are from an you are from an IIT or a BITS or something, they would admit you with whatever GPA you have. It doesn't work that way. But sometimes some universities might give a little concession, or when they do their evaluation, they would say that this one is from a really tier one university in India. So we might consider this applicant even with a slightly lower GPA. And again, I use the word slightly lower GPA, not very low GPA. When I'm comparing this application with another applicant from a say a Mumbai University or say a Pune University or some other university. So that is where the premium universities in India might get a little bit of students from these premium universities might get a little advantage, but it's not a very significant one. Uh, Also, the GPA of last 4 semesters is significantly more important than the GPA of your earlier semesters. So if your GPA in the last 4 semesters is slightly higher, that is always a plus point. So now, if you for those who joined a little late, if you have any questions at any point, just feel free to interrupt me and ask, and I'll be happy to take them, or you could put them in the message box. Okay. Now, universities that require the GRE, generally what they do is that the evaluation happens as more as a combination of your GPA and GRE. It's not so they would require that okay, the GPA has to meet a certain criteria as well as the GRE scores also we need um, above a certain limit. Generally, for engineering or science or technical courses, the GRE quant score is given a little more importance than the verbal score. Does not mean that the verbal is not important, but comparatively, universities prefer students with a much higher quant score. So they would say there would be an internal kind of understanding for each universities, each program's admission between the admission committee members, saying that we would prefer students with say 8 plus GPA and maybe a 162 or 163 above on the GRE. Sometimes it would be like an 8 plus GPA or a percentile on a specific percentile. They say a 60% at least on the GRE quant and a 50% on the GRE verbal. Those kind of criteria. Now, those are some things which generally universities do not disclose in on their admission websites or anywhere in this thing. But those details, if you look at statistics of past students who have gotten, sometimes you might be able to make that kind of a judgment on what are the minimum scores that they, I mean, what are the average scores of students who have gotten, what is the cutoff that all maybe all students have a GRE of so and so and above kind of thing. Uh, a question that students generally have is that now that given GRE is optional, or rather many universities don't require it, should you still be giving the GRE? I mean, this is something that we get. This question is one of the most popular questions that has come up in the past 2 3 years. Now, I'll put it this way: if you really see, giving the GRE is one factor, but getting a good score on the GRE is equally important. I mean, merely giving the GRE is not going to help you in your applications. Universities, there are few universities that don't require the GRE. Like for example, I think Northeastern doesn't require the GRE at all. I mean, they say that even if you give it, we won't consider it. Even University of Southern California doesn't require the GRE. I think Duke doesn't require the GRE, and there are a few others. Some universities say that GRE is optional. When they say GRE is optional, in the sense they say that if you have a GRE score and you present it, we will definitely consider it as part of the application components. But if you don't have a GRE score, you can still apply. Right now, if you have if you are applying to a university where GRE is optional, and you have a strong GRE score, presenting that will definitely strengthen your application. So, um, and over the past few years, I mean, past 2 years rather, since this GRE optional thing or GRE requirement has been removed, what has happened is that the number of applicants to universities that don't require the GRE or where GRE is optional has increased drastically, because my estimate is that almost now more than 50% of the students who apply for their MS have stopped giving the GRE or have stopped presenting their GRE scores. Some because they haven't given the GRE, and some because their GRE scores are not really strong. For example, say you have a 9 GPA, you are applying to one of the top 30 programs, and your GRE score is say 305, obviously that score is not going to make a strong impact. So you would rather send your applications without the GRE scores. So if you have the option of giving the GRE, as in you have the time to study, you think you can really do well on the GRE, my recommendation is that always give the GRE. At least give it an attempt. Try to see if you can use that GRE score to strengthen your application, because that is honestly one of the few variables that can be changed. I mean, you can't go back and change your GPA. If your GPA is not that strong, there's nothing you can do about it. But GRE is something that is still under your control. You can go ahead and change it. You can improve your scores and kind of improve your chances of getting into a better university. And that will also give you a chance to apply to universities where GRE is mandatory. Because what has happened is, like I was saying, since many students don't give the GRE, um, applications to universities where GRE is still required have dropped down drastically. So there the competition has become lesser. So if you have a GRE and a good score, that will improve your chances of getting into such universities. And once now, although universities follow what I would call a holistic application process, the first round of screening generally happens on the basis of the GPA or GRE score. And then they look at whether you have the relevant research experience, whether work experience, of course, work experience is required for the program. Then they would read the SOPs. Uh, and after that, they would look at your resumes, your letters of recommendations, and all that. Now, typically, what happens is many students are of the opinion that if I have a low GPA, I have low GRE scores, I can still write a strong SOP and get through. Unfortunately, maybe that could have been possible 40 years ago, but now, given the volumes of applications that universities get, that is honestly not possible. Uh, because what happens is, say, for a program, if, say, for example, you're applying to maybe say an XYZ university, their intake is 100, right? And they get 1,000 applications. Now, the admission committee is not going to sit and read all your 1,000 SOPs. The first round of screening will happen based on your overall profile, which will be a GPA, GRE, and sometimes they might just glance through your resume to see what kind of profile you have. But mostly it will be the GPA and GRE, and then they would shortlist, say, out of the say 1,000 applicants that they have received, they would shortlist based on the GPA, GRE factor, say 200 to 250, and then for those 200 to 250, they would start looking at how strong is the resume, what is written in the SOP, whether they have relevant work experience or research experience, and all those factors. So, as I said, the first round of screening happens on these factors, and then the rest of it is important. So, while everything is important, not everything is equally important. So, often students ask, how do I improve my profile? I mean, given that we are already in September, if you are applying for the fall 2025 intake, that is August 2025 intake, you should be having your applications ready by um, say maybe November, December, or January, depending on the timelines and the universities that you are applying to. And doing research or maybe working on some projects or something may not always be possible for everybody. And hence our answer, it is mine and Josna's answer to such students, are that if you really want to strengthen your profile, improve your GRE scores or get a good GRE score. Of course, I've written GMAT here also, because in case someone is applying for the business programs and decide to give the GMAT, you can give the GMAT to improve your scores. But since most of the students, I mean, um, at least today in today's webinar, are MS applicants applying for technical STEM programs, so I thought I'm just using the word GRE. As far as TOEFL and IELTS scores are concerned, they are mostly used as cutoffs. Although a high score can sometimes slightly improve your chances, but not very significantly. Like each university has a minimum cutoff for the TOEFL or IELTS. Um, say a university would say for so and so program, like for example, again I'm using Northeastern, computer science, their cutoff is 100. They need 100 on the TOEFL, right? And maybe 7 or 7.5 on the IELTS. Um, if your TOEFL scores do not meet that cutoff, they will by default reject your application. So TOEFL scores are very strict, have very strict cutoffs. TOEFL or IELTS scores have very strict cutoff. If you don't meet those, they will not consider your application whatsoever. some universities have the option of giving you conditional admit, but unless that is clearly mentioned on their admissions website, saying that if you're like, for example, University of Maryland, if you look at their website, they say there for certain programs, their TOEFL score cutoff is 97. But if you have a TOEFL score of between 91 to 97, they would give you a conditional admit, wherein after you go there, you will have to give an additional English language test. And if you don't clear that test, you will then be asked to take one English language course as in addition to your regular MS courses to complete your master's. So that is what the conditional admit is. George Mason actually asks you to do a complete one semester of English language coursework before they start your masters. So these condition, and then I mean the problem with those, uh, I mean sometimes they call them the English language pathway programs or the additional course. They would cost you additional money to do that. So generally, I don't recommend going for that option. Apply to universities where you meet the TOEFL or IELTS cutoff, and if you really think you might you don't meet it, then just drop that university or try to retake the test to improve your scores. That's what I would suggest. So for those who joined, any questions so far on this? You can just turn on your microphones and ask them, or put them in the chat box, whatever you are comfortable with. Yes, Santosh. Sure, sure. Yeah. I mean, my personal thing is I don't see much of a difference between them. The difference between TOEFL and IELTS is not much in terms of the content, right? If you look at which is, if you ask me which is easier, which is difficult, I find both are easy. So I've never really, I mean, all these years, I have never found any specific difference between TOEFL and IELTS in terms of the difficulty levels. Coming to that, earlier, maybe 5 years down the line. Students generally preferred TOEFL because there was many universities that didn't accept IELTS then. But now, and IELTS were traditionally offered by the British Council and was accepted mostly by UK universities or somewhere in Europe. TOEFL was is offered by ETS, which is an American organization, and TOEFL is more accepted by was started initially accepted by um, what do you say, the US universities. But now what has happened is uh, in fact, even almost all universities in the US accept IELTS, and almost all universities in the UK also have started accepting TOEFL. There is Duolingo, which came up during COVID because centers were closed, and Duolingo was the first to offer a home-based testing. Unless you really can't give the TOEFL, IELTS, or have miserably failed giving them, I would still suggest TOEFL or IELTS and not the Duolingo. That is because there are still many universities that have stopped, that don't accept or have stopped accepting Duolingo. It was only during the TOEFL phase, I mean, sorry, not the COVID phase, that many universities have started accepting. But 2025, I don't think many would still accept. So don't, if you haven't given any exam yet, then I would say give TOEFL or IELTS. Another difference between the TOEFL and IELTS is that IELTS score reporting is cheaper, and that is why IELTS has started getting a little more popular. Because when you apply to universities, you have to send your scores to the universities for directly through either TOEFL or IELTS. That is, you have to log into the website and report your scores. TOEFL gives you the option of reporting 4 universities for free, but you have to give them the names of those 4 universities before you give the exam. Um, IELTS, on the other hand, gives you the option of reporting 5 universities for free, and you can give the names after the exam also, up to 1 month after the exam. Also, in case you have to send your scores to additional universities, that is beyond the 4 TOEFL or beyond the 5 free IELTS one, TOEFL charges $20. IELTS charges 250 rupees. So the difference is huge. So the cost factor in IELTS is slightly less. But to combat that, now what TOEFL has done, I mean, there are some schemes available on the universities on the ETS website, or you can just contact me sometime. Some days I generally get updates about their schemes. TOEFL has started they started giving some 2000 rupees, I think, discount voucher on the test booking. And they said you can send your scores to 8 universities for free, kind of thing. So You can see whichever if there is some good schemes, or sometimes they have these bundled schemes where you pay for GRE and TOEFL together, and then you can get a 5,000 rupees discount or something like that. So, I mean, just on that note, if anyone is booking the GRE or TOEFL and really wants to know what discount vouchers are there, just get in touch with me. If I have something, I would be happy to share it with you, because we get updates from these ETS people. ILTS does not give any vouchers, at least not yet. So I don't have anything for ILTS. We get updates from the GRE, from the ETS team about vouchers that are currently there. So if someone wants something at any point, I'll be happy to just share it with you. But coming back to your question, TOEFL or IELTS, anything is fine. Huh? Yeah. Mhm. No, no. There is, I mean, I think MIT, TOEFL, yeah. Stanford has only TOEFL. MIT for one program, yeah, I think one of their programs, I don't remember, it was, I think, the industrial management program. They don't accept IELTS for some reason. I mean, sorry, TOEFL for some reason. They, for some the past 2 years, they said we want only IELTS for international students. I think because they felt that there were too many, what do you say? Hmm malpractices happening at the TOEFL centers in India and China. So they stopped accepting TOEFL and IELTS. But there are one or two kind of thing which accept either one of them. But mostly, I don't think you will have, unless you are aiming for very specific top university programs or maybe and specific programs. I don't think you will be at a disadvantage giving either. I think Swarnalta, you were planning to ask something. Okay, and I think someone posted here some question here in the chat box. Uh, Just now, I think you answered that already. Uh, what are the good GRE scores for the top 2025 colleges? Can you give some examples? Um, so yeah, GRE scores. Yeah, I mean, so I think someone Raghav has a question. What are the GRE scores? So a good GRE score is like I would say 320 plus. I mean, I think Josna has answered that with at least 165 plus on the quant and 155 plus on the verbal. So anything above that, I mean, of course, 330 is even better, 335 is even better. But if you have a 320 plus, I think you are good. But again, the quant and verbal distribution should be taken into account. Uh, a 160 and a 160 score may not really be, although it might still make 320, it might not be a good score because your quant of 160 might not be considered as a great score by many universities. So, what factors do you consider when you shortlist universities? Of course, the first thing that you should be looking at is whether they offer your program or the course that you are looking at, right? Say, for example, if you are looking at a program in data science, then apply to universities that offer courses in data science. That is the first thing. Rankings, location, cost. You see the profiles of past students who have been admitted, career opportunities that are being offered. Some factors are very easy to get, like the rankings, the program cost, the location, and all that. Whereas other factors, right? And the reason why I put in location and career opportunities and the profiles of past students who have got in and all that may not be easy to get, but I always feel that, I mean, if you see, I mean, most of you, we are already in September. The fact that you guys are here uh, attending a webinar means that you know that you are going to pursue your master's at some point of time, or at least that is the intent. I would say use this time to network. And when I say network, in the sense, get in touch with students from, say, you want to do a course in data science, you want to go do a course in, say, maybe machine learning, or you want to do a course in engineering management, maybe whatever, biotechnology or whatever it is. Go to LinkedIn, find students who are currently find universities that you would like to go to, talk to students who are already at these universities, connect with them on LinkedIn. Use LinkedIn a little more better to connect, so that you have a good sense of what do you expect, not only in the program, as a maybe as a student, but also after you graduate, what kind of opportunities can you get. So this is something that you can, I would suggest that you should start right now, building your LinkedIn profile, probably connecting with students, so that you are in a much better position, both in terms of awareness as well as in terms of maybe your future career opportunities that you would like to tap in, right? I mean, you have a more realistic understanding of what to expect once you reach there, and you have a very strong network by the time you already are in the US. Maybe a little later we'll discuss about jobs and this thing, or maybe we'll do a separate webinar on that, jobs and careers and internships in the US, and you will realize that you will get the possibility of you getting a job is very high if you have a very strong network in the US. And this doesn't apply only to US, by the way. There might be some students here who might be considering looking at UK as an option, or maybe some other country as an option. Having a good network is always good. I mean, it can be as simple as finding housing. That network can come handy when it comes to finding housing and roommates, or it could be, finding jobs or something like that, career opportunities, or just maybe just connecting with the right people at some point, right? That will always help. So when you look at universities, you consider all these factors. I mean, don't just look at, okay, rankings are good, program or course is good, but also look at the cost. I mean, probably there is, or you might say, oh, Columbia is a great university. I would want to study data science at Columbia. Okay, great. Or I would like to study data science at Duke. But Columbia and Duke are going to charge you almost like a $80,000 to $90,000 as tuition for the program. Now, although the program is good, the rank is good, location is, again, Columbia being in New York is great. But if you have to study at Columbia, you will probably spend almost 100 to 110,000. I mean, you're looking at an Indian budget of 80 to 90 lakhs for the entire program. Um, I'm not saying you should not go to Colombia. I'm not saying that it is not worth going to Colombia and spending that money. But the question that you need to ask yourself is, can I raise this kind of money? Right. So that is the most important question, because if you can't, um, and that's why financial planning is something that you should also start, so that you have, you know that, okay, this is the budgets that I can work with. Uh, but if you really feel that, okay, no, I can't raise that much money, the maximum I can raise is say 50 to 60 lakhs, then it is always better to apply to programs within that budget range. Sometimes, because what happens, it's, I mean, of course you can apply and obviously not go, but then also you also need to understand that applications are not free. I mean, you will spend $100 on application fees, some money on sending your GRE and TOEFL scores and all that. So why waste that 8 9,000 rupees that probably could be used for something else on an application or on applying to a university where you cannot eventually afford to go, even if you get an admit. So Nalata, you were asking something? You wanted to ask something? Oh, okay. Is it better now? Oh, okay, fine. Um, so yeah, so that is what I was telling. I mean, when you look at the university, when you do your university shortlisting, you look at all factors, and that is where, talking to students who are currently at these universities can also give you a sense of what kind of profiles does this university accepts, or where do you stand a chance. I mean, you don't want to apply to a Stanford, Berkeley, or even maybe an Austin or a Texas A&M, when you know that, okay, either I don't have a chance here, or maybe my profile is too strong for this university. I mean, both ways, it works both ways, right? Sometimes you might apply to a university and then realize that everybody at this university has profiles much lower than what I have. And sometimes it might just work that my profile is really not strong enough to get into this university. So that is where, when you do your research, it really helps in planning your applications, because unfortunately US applications, most of them are not free. I mean, it is going to cost you time and money to apply. In some countries like UK, applications are free in most cases, or at least, except leaving a few universities, it is free. But the US is a costly affair. I mean, applying itself is a slightly costly affair. On an average, you might spend some anywhere between 8 to 10,000 rupees on an application. So it is always go. I mean, it's always better to plan your applications a little wisely. And when I say applications, it means the shortlisting of your universities. Any questions here? I think there are some in the chat. Huh. No, that is the complete program for Columbia. 80 to 90K is the fee for Columbia for some of their programs. That is for the complete program. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hmm. No, no, okay, sorry. Complete program. So when you say 2 years, right, it is not exactly 2 years. There are some programs which are 1 year, and some programs for engineering are it can be completed in 1.5 years. Now, so in the US, right, the programs are not really very, I mean, in the sense there is no definite structure to it, right? It depends. There is only a minimum amount of courses that your credits, what they call it, is what you have to take in every semester. Okay, but you can always take more and finish it faster. Most students take 3 semesters, or some students take 4 semesters to complete their masters. So when you go in August, some students, I mean, I would say bulk of the students try to graduate by December. So if you go in August 2025, many students would want to graduate by December 2026. Okay. 1.5 years, right? So it would be 2 semesters. You do first semester would be August to December. The next semester would be January to May. Then what they do is from the semester of June to August again, they would do an internship. And then after the internship, come back and do one more semester, which would be again from September to December, and graduate. The reason why many students prefer this format, or rather do it this way, is that if the internship converts to a full-time job, the company wants them on payroll soon. So if you do your internship in the summer and the company is willing to offer you a full-time offer, then it is better to just finish your masters in the remaining one semester and join the company in January. So that is why many students prefer December graduation. Another reason why some students prefer December graduation, I mean, I'll explain the timelines a little more in detail later. But if you graduate in December, many companies have hirings in starting January. Uh, and also another factor is that used to influence this decision was that the H1B visa applications actually open up in April. So if you start your job in January, by April you might be able to apply for the first time for the H1B visa application, which H1B is your work permit application. If you actually graduate in May, then sometimes you will have to wait till the next April for the company to file your H1B visa. That is why many students prefer December graduation. But now H1B visa applications have changed. They have started accepting applications both in April as well as August. So this December graduation, just for that H1B sake, may not happen so much. I mean, students might not want to graduate in December just so that they catch the first round of H1B visa applications in April. But earlier that was also a factor. But from this year, H1B visa applications, they have started accepting in April, as well as then they opened up another window of applications in August. So that is not a factor. But the fact is, yes, most students don't really use the full 2 years to complete their masters. Mm. Yeah. समर में एडमिशंस नहीं रहता है, इट स्प्रिंग स्प्रिंग स्प्रिंग, हाँ, स्प्रिंग एंड फॉल बेसिकली. Yes. So this is how many universities that you could apply to. Generally, this is what we would recommend. Of course, there is no rule that this is what you should do, but generally apply to more dream universities, 3 to 5 universities, maybe 3 to 4 moderate and maybe 2 safe ones. We generally recommend don't apply to too many safe universities. At the end of your entire application, you don't want to sit with too many safe admits. They don't really help. It's always better to get one good admit, one of your dream admits, rather than having 5 safe admits, because you just have to study at one university. So, but many students feel that okay, I need five admits, I need six admits. Students also have this question that if I have only one admit, will that affect my chances of getting a visa? Honestly, no. So don't worry that okay, I need to collect admit just so to make my case stronger for the visa. It doesn't really matter. As long as you have one good admit, you will get your visa. Uh, doesn't matter how many you apply to, how many you admits you have, and all that. Okay. Any questions that you have? I think there are some which Josna has answered here in the chat box, and those are very specific to someone's asking about their GPA kind of thing. But yeah, um, any questions or shall we move on? Okay, I'll move on to the next. Yeah, so these are the timelines generally that you should follow for your applications. If you're applying for fall, so fall is August. Uh, spring is another intake, which is January. There is a summer term which is after spring. So the timeline is goes like fall, August, and then summer, and then after that again fall, August, summer. That is how most universities follow their timelines. There are very few universities that have intakes in summer, or at least for international students, most universities don't offer summer intakes. So generally, the universities offer, and the fall is the actual start of the calendar year, academic year. So all universities offer admissions in fall. Some universities don't offer January intakes, and there are some which offer both. I mean, you can either join in fall or spring. Now, I think some you had asked me what is the difference between applying in fall and spring, and but before that, these are the timelines that you need to follow. Um, some of the good universities, or if you're looking at a university which is really high on the rankings, they have the deadlines around 1st December, 15th December would be the deadlines. Very few universities maybe would have like their first round of deadlines in November itself. For example, I think UPenn has of their for most of their program, University of Pennsylvania has 15th November as the first round of deadline, but then they have a second round of deadline in later in January or March kind of thing. But their early application deadline for some of their programs is in November. Indiana University again, I think for their MIS programs uh, has one early round deadline on 1st of November, and this is the deadline for the August 2025 intake. So their first round deadline would be November 1st. I mean, you don't have to apply in that round. You can apply for the in the 15th November or the 1st December round as well. Um, but then yes, it is up to you. If you want to really catch, if you think you are done with almost everything, you can apply in the first round of deadline. Okay. Uh, yeah, I'm sorry. Uh, in the if you have an option of applying in the first round, I would suggest apply in the first round. Okay. That is one thing. Just 1 minute. Huh? Yeah. Okay. So if you have the option of applying in the first round, apply in the first round. Uh, because what happens is generally what happens is the later you apply, and that same thing applies to rolling admission. So I wanted to talk about that also. Some universities have a rolling admission process. Okay. When they say rolling admissions, what they mean is that they would review applications as and when they receive it. I mean, it's not exactly as and when they receive it, but generally they review applications in phases. For example, some universities have deadlines of say June 1st for their this thing, like UT Dallas, for example, right? Their deadline for applications is June 1st for most of their programs. Even for example, Northeastern, their deadline for some programs is as late as May 1st for the fall intake, for the August intake. But if you apply in November, or even if you apply in October, within 6 weeks or 8 weeks, they would give you a decision. Uh, doesn't mean that they give you an admit. just because you apply early. It is not first come first serve. It's not that, otherwise in that case everybody would apply to every university in August itself and secure your admit on the day they open their application sites. But what happens is the more you delay, like for example Northeastern, for example if you apply in the month of say March, by then they have already rolled out maybe 100 admits. And if their class size is say they decide that okay we probably want to give out 150 admits, I'm just giving you making up numbers, those are not the exact numbers. But if they already have rolled out 100 admits and then they want to roll out only 120 admits for example, then they become a little more strict in terms of profile evaluation. Like they become more choosy. I mean, with the same profile, you might find that students who applied early in October, November have already got admits, whereas the same profiles start getting rejects if you apply later. So if you have a chance or the possibility of applying early, my recommendation is always apply early. The only time if you think you should delay your applications is maybe if you are still not yet given your GRE exam or the TOEFL exam, or if you have already taken the GRE and you want to use that time, you're not happy with the scores, you want to improve your scores, then it is worth waiting. So if you ask me, would it make sense to apply with a weaker score now or with a stronger score later, I would say apply with a stronger score later. But if nothing is going to change in your profile in the next 3 or 4 months, then don't just waste time not applying because you are busy with something else. Finish your applications and then devote time towards, or probably I know yes some of you might have college exams, your work pressures and all that. So but at the same time devote some time towards your application. Don't think array iska deadline is 15th March, iska deadline is 1st May, so I have enough time and I'll apply in April, kind of stuff. That will only reduce your chances of getting admission the more you wait. Some universities, like I said, they have only one deadline. Like if you look at UCLA, first for computer science, 1st December is the deadline. Stony Brook, 15 December is the deadline. Most of these schools, in fact, Georgia Tech also for some programs has 1st December as the deadline. So if you miss that deadline, you can't do anything, right? So universities which have very early deadlines in November or December, right, and they have only one deadline for that matter, uh, they are just going to be. I mean, they won't consider anything that comes after the deadline. So universities which have multiple deadlines, I would suggest apply in the first round. Um, or maybe the second round is also okay, assuming that there are no more rounds, kind of thing. But even if there are three third rounds and fourth rounds, I would say first or second rounds are okay. But where there is rolling admission, apply early. Okay. Coming to the difference between applying for a fall admission or spring admission, right? So what happens is, fall is the major intake, and a big disadvantage of applying in spring is that you are not allowed to do a summer internship. I mean, when I say you are not allowed, in the sense international students are not allowed to do a summer internship if you go in spring, or at least the first summer. So the rule says that to do an internship, you should have completed 2 semesters of coursework. When I say 2 semesters, it should be one fall and one spring. Summer semester is not counted, although in summer you can take courses. But so if you go in August, by the time summer comes starts in June. So by the time June, you have finished 2 semesters. Or that is, you have finished one fall and one spring. So when some in summer you will be allowed to do an internship. But if you go in January, which is spring, right, you would have completed only one semester of coursework by the time summer starts. So you will not be issued what is known as the CPT, um, which is given by the university only, which allows you to do a internship in the summer. So CPT is like a permission that the university gives. It is known as curricular practical training certificate. So they will not issue you that CPT certificate or the CPT letter until you finish 2 semesters of coursework. So if you go in January, you might miss out on the opportunity to do a summer internship. So if you have the option, I mean, since we are all in September here, if you have the option, if there is someone here who's planning for spring, that is great. But if not, and you're thinking, should I apply in fall or should I just go the next spring, that is 2026 January? I would say go in August 2025. That would be a better time to go rather than waiting for spring. Another small, of course, there is a small, some universities, as I said, don't have spring admission. So maybe if you want to go to a university and maybe it's your dream college and they don't have spring, then you can't do anything. You will have to apply in fall only. Beyond that, sometimes, funding is slightly easier to go in if you go in fall, because that is the start of the calendar year. uh, Universities know what budgets they have in terms of funds, and by the time I mean, by the time you go in January, there's already a bunch of students who have joined in fall, and all the funding opportunities have been exhausted on them. So I'm not saying that if you go in fall you have a very high chance of funding, but whatever little bit chance you have in fall gets wiped out if you go in spring. Okay, so that is the main difference between fall and spring. Any questions here on fall, spring, or the timelines, or anything that we covered till now? Okay. Uh, okay. Moving on, we'll quickly talk about SOPs and LORs, but I think the SOP and LOR is such a vast topic that generally I prefer to do a complete session on this. Maybe I will send you out invites. Okay, so coming to that point, I mean, sending you out invites before that, before I forget. Um, so Mm, if you really would like to receive updates from me, maybe since you all have got WhatsApp messages, just reply to them saying that I would like to receive updates so that I know whom to send updates and whom not to. There is also a WhatsApp group that we have formed. I don't know if some of you might be on that group for fall 2025 applicants. Um, Maybe after this webinar I'll try to send you all that link, so I'll just keep posting those details on the, I mean, we do webinars on, like, this is the MS application, but there are webinars on SOPs writing. We do interactive sessions with past students, mentor sessions kind of thing, so you could attend those and ask. So we invite students who are already studying in the US, and then you could directly ask questions to them. We do AMA sessions. AMA is more like, it's not where I don't do a presentation, but it's only a ask me anything kind of a session. So you just have questions, you just keep asking, and then we answer those. So for those, generally sending out these invites becomes a little tedious, because I don't know who is interested, who is not. I don't like to send out mass junk mails, because if a lot of people are not interested and they start reporting me as spam, my number gets blocked. So I don't want to take that chances. So I don't generally send out spam messages. So if you are genuinely interested, reply back, so that if and do that, do two things. One is add my number at least in your contact list, because if the number is in your contact list and you receive a message from me, WhatsApp doesn't consider that as a spam message. So that is one thing. I would strongly recommend that you connect with me and Josna on LinkedIn also. Um, it will just give you access to our network in case, and then in case there are these events happening, we post on LinkedIn. Um, so it always becomes easier for, I mean, and then maybe, as I said, growing your network on LinkedIn is also important. On that note, there was someone in the group yesterday who was who had some coupons for LinkedIn premium account. I'm not sure if you would want the premium account or not, but in case you are interested, maybe get in touch with me, or like I said, in that WhatsApp group, if you are already there, maybe you can contact that guy. Max Johnson was his name. He's also a student applying to the fall 2025 intake, and he also had some coupons on, what do you say, he had some Coursera coupons that he told me that he had. So 1 year Coursera subscription for 1,000 rupees. In case someone is interested, I mean, you guys are planning any Coursera courses and want a subscription of Coursera for 1 year, you could probably contact him, or you can contact me. I'll put you in touch with him, and he can give you those coupons. Okay, so coming back to the SOP part, um, oh, and on that note also, there is also, in case you want to read some information about MS applications, me and Josna have written a book on MS applications in for US specifically, which has, I mean, a lot more information than what I'm doing in this webinar. That book is available for you to download on our website. If you want a copy, just send me a message. I'll just share the PDF version of it with you. I mean, it's in PDF, it's not in print. So and it's a free download. But if you want it, I can just WhatsApp you on. I can just send it to you over WhatsApp, or I can share the link where you can download it from. Okay, that is in case you are interested in getting that book. So coming back, and there that has a lot of information on SOPs, also some sample SOPs in case you want to go through some samples. uh, so when you start with the SOP, right? So the understand that the SOP is not like a magazine article that you have to write. It should be a very focused statement. 800 to 1000 words, maybe a little over is the okay. I mean, even if you go maybe more than 1000, it is okay as long as you keep it relevant, right? Don't just keep writing an SOP just because, I mean, talking about generic stuff. So the SOP should basically cover these four factors. First of all, why do you want to pursue a master's? Why do you want to do an MS? What aspects about your profile, which is basically your past experiences, I mean, it could be work experience, it could be your academic experiences, are relevant and aligned with your master's degree. For example, if you're doing a master's in, say, um, engineering, say computer engineering for that matter, or computer science, right? So that what experiences in your past that you think are relevant, or which projects that you did in computer science as part of your projects, internships, or are relevant, that you can talk about that. Mention what was your contribution there, what did you learn from that experience. What are your future career goals? This is something which most students miss out in the SOP. They really don't discuss what do you plan to do in the future, and why do you want to apply to this university. So this is what the SOP should comprise of. Like I said, there is a whole blog that I've written on this topic. There are some videos also that I have posted on YouTube. And maybe, as I said, we could do a very interactive session on writing an SOP also sometime in the future. But overall, this is what your SOP should contain. What most students do is, I mean, what you should do is this. Make sure that be original. There are some, okay, now on when I say be original, it doesn't mean that you should not use help. Okay, or it doesn't again mean that you should not um, when I say be original, I mean that don't just copy from someone else's SOP and say this is my SOP. Universities use tools for plagiarism. um, there are certain, you could use AI tools to write your SOP. And if you look at, so this whole AdmitStar website that we started, it is just, I mean, what we are trying to do is build a community of MS applicants, a free community of MS applicants, where there is, where anybody can join, any genuine MS applicant can join, and you could get resources to help you with your applications. So one of the resource that we have there is a SOP writer, or when I say SOP writer, it's an AI based tool where you put in your profile details and it will give you a template of an SOP. You could use that. I mean, or you could use, there are, I'm sure, if you know how to use Chat GPT or Gemini or any of these Microsoft Copilot or any of these tools very effectively, you know what kind of prompts to give it, you could use that. But what we have done is we have kind of created those prompts so that you don't have to worry about what do you tell Chat GPT to write. So we have done that for you. All you have to do is put in your profile and it will write an SOP. Does not, my very strong recommendation is don't just copy that SOP and paste it as your SOP. Universities nowadays use can detect AI written content. Use that as a template, because then that is not something which you should use as it is in your application. That tool is just as a starting point, so that for those who really don't know how to write an SOP, you could use that as a starting point. It will give you an SOP. Work on it, rework on it, try to reframe it in your own way. But that will, rather than copying someone else's SOP and doing it, you could have a AI generated content or SOP as your first draft. And as I use the word first draft, don't make that your final draft. So there are a lot of, like I said, you could use the book that I have. There are samples there. You could read those. You could understand how could which kind of what kind of things should go in the SOP. So these are all tools to help you. They cannot be your final SOP there. But talk about these things. So be original. Discuss what your future goals are. Talk about what research you have done. again, don't just talk about what you have done. I mean, the recipe should not be a prose version of your resume. In the sense, in the SOP, you have to highlight, also talk about what was the innovative thing, what problems did you encounter while working on a project, how did you solve those problems, what makes it a little more, what made it interesting, what failures did you have, because in the resume and all, you may not talk about all that. So if something didn't work, why did it not work, what did you do to make it work, those kind of aspects, or those kind of anecdotes you could maybe mention in the SOP. uh, but at the same time, keep it concise. I mean, and keep it relevant to the topic, because you need to understand that the person reading the SOP is probably a faculty in the department that you are applying to. Okay, so they are more, for example, if you are applying to a mechanical engineering program, this person who is reading the SOP wants to know how good are you at mechanical engineering. Of course, yes, you could discuss a little bit, and as use the word little bit, about your non-academic activities, but don't make the entire SOP about that. I mean, maybe you might be the captain of your cricket team, or maybe the the leader of your dance club, and you have won many dance competitions. But if you're applying for a mechanical engineering, the professor there wants to know how good are your skills in mechanical engineering. So you talk about your projects, your internships related to mechanical. Maybe yes, you could add a sentence or two about your non-academic activities, but not, don't make the bulk of it about it. Another classic mistake that students make in the SOP is the generic content, writing about generic content. And when I say generic content, uh, what they start off the SOP is like, for example, if someone is interested in automobiles, right? Or automobile engineering, or probably, then they write one whole paragraph about the future of uh, maybe self-driven cars, right? Or so you are so that those content, that generic content makes a good magazine article, because the reader is a general, or general public. But here the reader is a professor in the department. You don't need to tell the professor in the mechanical engineering department on the future of self-driven cars. I mean, that person knows it, and that person knows it much better than you. I mean, eventually you're going to learn from that person, right? So you don't have to educate that person on what is the future of AI, or the use of AI in self-driven cars and all that. So you don't write about generic stuff. You tell them what have you done in any particular domain. Okay. And again, don't start your, one of the things that I generally feel is that students start from saying that, if, okay, I was interested in racing cars right from childhood, and that is how I decided to go in for a degree in mechanical engineering. Most common thing. Even today, computer science students write about how they were so impressed when they saw played their first game on the laptop. Or their dad's laptop or mom's laptop, and that is how they got interested in computer science. Honestly, those stories really don't make much sense, or are not really of any interest to anybody. On why you decided to do a degree in, say, electrical engineering or electronics engineering, or maybe, say, why did you choose microbiology as your subject, or why did you decide to become a dentist? Nobody really cares, right? They want to know how good of a dentist are you. I mean, if you're applying for a program in dental material, then how good of a dentist are you? If you're applying for a program in telecommunications, then how good of a electronics engineer are you? So nobody, it, I mean, everybody knows how admissions work in India and around the world. In a 12th standard, you probably chose electronics engineering because you didn't wanted so and so college, and you didn't get say computer engineering there, or maybe your parents forced you to do it. Really doesn't matter, right? What matters is how well did you perform in that course, what kind of projects did you do, what did you learn in that. So write more about that, focus more on your bachelor's degree and the work that you have done during and after your bachelor's degree. Avoid anything that you have done in school, or no need to give any motivational talk on why did I choose this particular stream, right? Now, keep it more futuristic, in the sense, what do you want to do in the future, and how did that passion develop? Like, for example, if you are like talking about self-driven cars, why do you want to get into self-driven cars? Or if you want to get into product development after an engineering management program, why do you want to get into product development? write about that rather than talking of why you want to get into I mean, yes, why do you want to get into engineering management is good, but don't come up with a childhood story for that. That you were always good in management and you always wanted to do engineering from your school days and all that. So don't bring school days stories. Keep it more relevant to your bachelor's degree and beyond. Same goes with recommendations are a little easier to draft. Uh, Ideally, recommendations should be drafted by your recommenders, which is your teachers or your managers. But most of the times they ask students to do it. Similarly, like I said, on the AdmitStart website, there are tools to draft your recommendation letters also, where you give them, it will ask you prompts, and if you answer them, it will give you templates of recommendations. You could probably use those, but uh, this is how you basically approach a recommendation. The recommender's designation is not really that important, so don't really go chasing people with really high designations. One problem is that if they really don't do things on time for you, your application is going to get affected, and this is one of the major problems with MS applicants, is that they choose recommenders who are not really available or willing to do things on time for the students. For instance, if you put in the name of a recommender in your application, I'm sure I mean, most of you might be aware that recommendations have to be submitted by your recommenders directly online. As in, if you, in your application, the application form would ask you for the name, designation, email ID of your recommender. You would have to put in those details, and email will be sent to the recommender. The recommender will have to click on the email and upload the recommendation there. If the recommender does not do that on time, your application will still remain incomplete. Like, means you have filled your application, you have submitted everything, you have paid your application fees, but one of your recommender does not find the time to check his or her email, click on the link that is there on the email and submit your reco. If they can't do that or don't do that, your application will remain incomplete. Beyond a certain point, the university will keep sending you reminders saying that your application is incomplete. Please ask your recommenders to complete it. Beyond a certain point, they will just drop your application. So even though you applied before the deadline, say the deadline is 1st of December, uh, if the recommender does not complete it beyond a certain point, say maybe 15th of December, your application will be remain incomplete and will not be given any consideration. So find recommenders whom you are confident enough will do things on time for you. I mean, at least what they can do is forward those emails to you so that you can click on those links and upload it. But if they do nothing about it and they just sit on those emails without clicking on those links, your application will be incomplete. And that is why find people whom you can at least call and tell them that you should have received an email from so and so university. Please complete that application. Okay. Any questions so far? I mean, I think there is one question here. That Let me take that. Oh, Anuja Deshmukh. Any group for MBA in the US? Anuja, I'm not aware of any such group right now. Mm, but in case I come across something, I'll definitely put you in touch with that group. I'll probably put it there. It is just that, I mean, for those who are trying for MBAs in the US, make sure that, I mean, just a recommendation, Anuja, go for a STEM MBA, because otherwise finding jobs in the US is kind of challenging unless you go for a STEM degree. So that is one recommendation that I would have. Beyond that, yes, of course, depending on your profile, you can consider the whether it's an MBA or, and unless you. So another thing that I generally tell about MBAs. Uh, okay. Fine. Another thing that I generally tell about the MBA program is that when you do an MBA, right, the brand of the university matters a lot. So choose your MBA programs wisely. When it comes to MS, you are still okay going to. I mean, the ranking does not matter so much when it comes to your job search, but when it comes to in an MBA, the brand matters a lot. Uh, so choose your MBA programs. I mean, make sure that you get into the best possible MBA program if you want a good career. Um, I think here Vaishnavi, you were has posted a message that she lost, she was disconnected for a while. Can you just, in short, explain what do you mean by recommenders? Recommenders are something. I mean, see, in as part of your application, Vaishnavi, you will have to submit recommendation letters. Recommendation letters have to be submitted by your recommenders. You will have to choose. Most universities require two or three recommenders, so you will have to choose three recommend. Find three, either professors, or if you're working, then maybe your immediate manager who can give recommendation letters. Recommendation letters are to be submitted directly by the recommenders to the universities. So in your application, you will be asked to put in the name, email ID of your recommender. An email would be sent to the recommender, and they will have to click on the email and upload the recommendation letter there. Most recommenders, at least in India, would ask you to provide them with the drafts of the recommendation letters, because they may not know what to write, or they may be too busy to write something. So they would ask you to write something and check that. So that is what we were discussing here. Swarnalata, yes, you had a question. Yes, yes, they should. They cannot use Gmail accounts. That is fine. See, your recommenders can change your company, your teachers can change your college, kind of thing, right? That happens. That is a very common thing. In the LOR, it is always good to, in say, for example, you were working in some XYZ company earlier, and now that manager has gone to another company, or your professor from your college has shifted the university colleges or changed jobs. They should still have, I mean, if they're completely retired and at home and now only use Gmail or Yahoo accounts, then I would say avoid those. Otherwise, the best option would be that in the letter of if they still have a new domain, email domain of a new organization that they have joined, in the letter of recommendation they can mention that while from so and so till, maybe say, maybe they moved, left their job in June 2024, right? So you can say that till June 2024 I was maybe a manager or professor at so and so university, college, or company. But and since then I have moved to so and so company, or I've taken up so and so position, right? So that if they mention that, that will explain that discrepancy whichever you're talking about the domain names not being the same. Okay. Yeah, I think so Anuja, the best source, of course, is US news rankings are good. US rankings are good. Look at Financial Times rankings also for MBA programs. They give you global information about this thing. Anuja, if you need this information, maybe you just connect with me on WhatsApp later. I'll share some links with you for the MBA thing. Okay. Um, Well, yes, cost, finances, and all that is again a big topic. Generally, sometime maybe a little too early to do this, but to go into the detail. Yeah. Uh, just now, can you just put my WhatsApp numbers, both of our WhatsApp numbers, on the chat, so that people who want it. It was there in one of the initial slides, but I think you guys missed it. But just put it on this thing, on the chat, so that we everybody has our numbers and contact details. Um, so, planning of finance, right? So, on an average, I mean, just to give you a rough estimate of the costs of the most, I mean, if you look at, there are some universities that are very cheap, some which are very costly. So, if you leave out the very cheap ones and the very costly ones, an average US master's degree today, in today's day and date, if you look at your cost of education, your cost of living, and all that, you are still looking at a budget of 50 to 60 lakhs, 50 to 65 lakhs. The rough estimate would be, 55 to 70 lakhs is the budget that you are looking at for your entire education. If that is your budget today, I think almost 80 to 90% of the universities in the US would be within your budget, right? There would, like I said, there are some universities which are expensive, some are very cheap. I mean, some probably, if you go to slightly remote areas like say Louisiana or maybe Montana and all those, you might find, or there is even some in Illinois, which are where the budgets are less than 35 lakhs. People with less than 35, 40 lakhs also can do a MBA, I mean, a master's degree. But most decent good universities in the US today would cost you somewhere in the 50 to 7, around 50 to 55 lakhs would be the tuition. And I would suggest that you budget at least 15 lakhs or 20 lakhs more for your living and stay. So that is how the budget would come to somewhere around 70 lakhs. Uh, when you plan your budget, right, you plan for both tuition and living. After you go there, if you get scholarships, if you get student jobs, your internships, most likely you might be able to cover up your living cost. But at least from a planning purposes, I would say plan for both. Now, there are a couple of things that you need to understand. One is the actual money that you will be spending, but at the same time, universities, when they issue you an admit, and you would want to get an I-20, which is I-20 is the document that you need to apply for a visa. You will have to show them 1 year of tuition and 1 year of living expenses to get that I-20. The living expenses that these universities estimate are generally very high. But as your I mean, as a requirement, you have to show that much. I mean, you can't argue with the university at any point saying that I plan to live with roommates. I'm not going to live single. My cost, I'm not going to use the university housing. I'll stay off campus. As per the university's website, whatever is their estimated living cost, you have to show that much funds available with you, either plus the 1 year of tuition. Um, so that you can basically get your I-20. So it is a very simple requirement. Uh, but what happens is that many times when students see, or students and especially parents, when they see that amount, they feel that, oh, this is the cost of 1 year. So my actual budget is going to be double of this, which is not the case. As I was discussing earlier, the duration of the MS depends on the number of credits or the number of courses that are required for the MS program. Most universities are around the 30 credit duration, or some are 36 also. So when you try to calculate your tuition for the program, don't just take this amount and double it, because that will not give you the right amount, and that will only lead to confusion. So this is something that I would like you to remember. So because universities, when they estimate the cost of education, for some reason, US universities are not very clear on what is going to be the total cost of the, nowhere, where very few universities will mention the cost of the complete program. They would say cost of 1 year. Now they don't really say how many credits are you going to take in 1 year. Like for example, take a case, Arizona State University, right? When they do the calculation, they assume that you will do 24 credits in 1 year, right? So when you when you see the cost, you see this is the tuition for 24 credits, but what they write, tuition for 1 year. But your masters in computer science program, or most masters at Arizona, are not 48 credits, right? Had they been 48 credits, then you could say yes, the cost of the I would need 2 years to do it, and it would take double the time. Their master's programs are 30 credits. So effectively, the cost of the complete program is going to be not exactly double, but maybe proportionately you will have to calculate, right? What would be the cost of 6 more credits, and just add that. But when someone sees that the cost of 1 year tuition is say 43,000, they feel that, okay, my cost of my master's degree is going to be 86,000. This is the immediate reaction that students get, and then this causes panic. And what happens is that many times students are not able to understand that this is not the cost, and this is not how I should be calculating the tuition. So don't get confused about the cost of tuition that is mentioned on the university's website. I mean, they have an explanation on how that is there, but what many students don't read that explanation. They just see cost of 1 year is 43,000, and then it will cost me 86,000 to complete the masters. So they just jump to that conclusion. Whereas if you see, they write clearly that this is the cost of 24 credits. If you go to your program site, you will see that my cost is 30 credits. So you can actually sit on the website and calculate the exact cost to the last dollar on how much the tuition is going to cost me. You can also do the calculation like, okay, if I do my masters in 3 semesters, like I have to take 30 credits. Should I, if I go 9, 9 and 9, 12 credits, how much will it cost? If I do 9, 9, 9 and 3 credits, that is I spread it over 4 semesters, how much will it cost? Because some universities charge per credit tuition and then they charge a semester fee also. Fees are slightly lower. It would be 500 to $1,000 per semester. But then if you are extending it by another semester, your cost might go up by $500 or $1,000 kind of thing. Correct. So yes, doing your program faster might reduce your cost a little, but even if you do it in 4 semesters, it's not going to be increasing proportionately, is what I'm trying to say. So when you do your cost calculation, just be careful about it. Don't just jump to conclusions and cause panic situations, or don't drop universities, because I know a student, someone who had contacted me last year, who said that I didn't go to NCSU because their cost of tuition is going to almost $75,000. I said no, NCSU does not charge that much. It would come to $60,000 only, because the same thing. I mean, the I-20 said after receiving the I-20, he had dropped this plan and had contacted me much later saying that I want to apply to cheaper universities. I had applied to NCSU, I got an admit, and my budget is only 60 lakhs. I said, you could manage NCSU in 60 lakhs. But according to him and his parents, the I-20 amount was showing different, and that's when they realized, that's when they felt rather that this is going to be a very expensive program, and they dropped that. So that was something that I had to sit and explain to this kid and his parents. And apparently he had fortunately not just cancelled his admit, he had just deferred his admit by a year. So next year he went to NCSU, whatever it is. And I told him, if you have a doubt now, always talk to current students there. So they will give, because someone who is already studying there will give you exactly how much tuition are they paying to the university. So they would always explain you better. So, but yes, don't just go by the I-20 amounts or what is given as tuition. This is something which I always tell, especially for MS in US applicants. If you look at UK universities, they give very clearly what is the tuition. There is no confusion there, but US universities are always very confusing. I mean, the way they put it is a little confusing. Any questions here? Yeah, any questions so far? Before we move on, we are already, we'll try to wrap up in the next, it's already 12:15. Generally, okay. Another very important, sure, sure, yeah. Okay, okay. One of the most, one of the factors that students are really very scared of is the visa process. And I think that the visa is the most, the US visa is one of the most simplest things to do. But because it is a very subjective topic of discussion, right? In the sense, there is no, it's not a very rule based decision making when it comes to the visa, because they say that the visa officer, it is up to the visa officer to make the visa decision for you, and they don't make decisions based on documents, whereas they make decisions based on interviews. Students are really scared about the visa. First thing that I would tell you is that the visa is the most simplest thing in the entire application process. It is just a 2 minute affair. But the amount of stress that students take for the visa, and I can understand that, because after going through the whole application process and all that, if your visa gets rejected, it is a big disappointment, because you have spent a lot of time, efforts, money on giving your exams, applying, waiting for the whole thing. And then at the end, if you don't get a visa, everything is, I mean, you are back to square one. So yes, so the visa is a important thing, but you really don't need to worry about it. Visas are given on very two simple things. One is, if you really have a good academic profile, you're going to a good university, a decent university, and you have the financial capabilities to fund for your education. If these two factors match, then you will definitely get the visa. The first factor is more important. That is, the kind of universities you go to a large extent influences the visa officer's decision on whether or not to give you a visa. And that is why I always tell students, choose good universities, go to good universities. Visa is one factor, but of course in terms of your careers, universities matter. Don't go I mean, it's not just the so many times students argue uh, that it doesn't matter, right? Anyway, my job is going to be based on my own I mean, I have to search for my own job. Universities are not going to find me the job, so how does it matter? So your peer group matters, your location matters, the faculty that is going to teach you matters. So going to a good university, and of course to a certain extent the brand matters too, right? The alumni networks that you would gain access to and all those. So they are all very, they are not very tangible factors to say that okay, yes, because the university is not going to, I mean, you don't have recruitment like you have in India. So whether I go to a top school or a medium school or a very low rank school, how would it matter? Of course, yes, if you have the opportunity or if you have the option of going to a better university or a good university, I would say do that. Don't compromise too much on the universities just because, mm, you know, for some other factor, because you feel that it doesn't really matter where I go, it does matter. The only time you might take, you might go to a lower ranked university if you probably do not have the financial capabilities of affording a really good university, um, or maybe you are getting fully funding, very strong funding from maybe some universities offering you funding. That can be a factor why you might probably take a small hit on the university's ranking or profile. But going to a better ranked university or good university or anything in the top 50, probably top 50, top 100, just also increases your chances of getting a visa. This is not I mean, this nobody, rather this is not an official statement from the consulate, but this is how things work there. Like for example, you will never see someone going to a maybe an Ivy League school getting a visa reject. But whereas there are some universities, for example, if you, I mean, uh, like say if you look at say Bridgeport or New Haven and all these universities, you will find the visa rejection rates for those universities are very high. So avoid some universities which are very low in the rankings is what I would recommend. Even if you have to, and doesn't mean that if you're going to a cheap university, you are going, your visa is going to get rejected. The ranking of the university also matters. I mean, there are cheap universities like for example Austin, Texas A&M, or even some of the California state universities. They are cheap, but they are good in rankings, right? So you still would have a strong chance of getting a visa. Don't just go to a cheap university where everybody who applies gets admission. It is going to affect your career because also the faculty, the peer group, and all are also going to be not really strong there. Uh, if you're using this just if you just want to go to the US, then yes, you can. But then if you want a good career in the US, pay attention to where you go, is what I would suggest. But the point what I'm trying to make is that don't be scared of the visa. If you Okay, things that matter in the visa are, one very important thing are your communication skills. When I say communication skills, is the when I mean is that if you cannot have a decent conversation in English with the visa officer, your chances of visa become low. So if for whatever reason you're not comfortable talking in English, then maybe this is the point you start talking in English. Start conversing in English. That will not only help you in your visa but also in your future interviews and this thing. You don't have to be I mean, you don't have to practice public speaking. I mean, you don't have to go and give a speech there. But if someone asks you why do you want to study, pursue your masters in the US, and if you can't even speak two sentences on why, it could be a problem. So if you can have a decent English conversation, you don't have to speak in an American accent and all that, so don't worry so much about it, or don't worry about it. In proper Indian accent, if you can give an answer in grammatically correct English, is what I'm saying, you should be fine. You don't have to prepare anything more for the visa. So just that is one thing, communication skills. As I said, clarity. When they ask you a question, answer that question. Don't try to by heart questions. I mean, of course, we'll do separate topics on the visa and all. It is too early to discuss. But the point, but again, don't be really scared of the visa. I mean, don't really think that the visa is a big issue. It's not. It's a very, very simple process. And if you get admits from good universities, the chances of you getting the visa are almost 100%. And this is how your overall I mean, this is just one slide I put in for you to understand how these are the working in the US. When you have to work in the US, like the first thing is your internship, for which you will need the CPT. The next thing is the uh, what do you say, after you graduate, right? For all masters you get 1 year of OPT. 1 year of OPT is optional practical training, that is like the work permit that you get to study in the US. Beyond that, you will have to, I mean, after you finish your OPT for 1 year, if your degree is a STEM degree, STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. That is, if your degree is classified as a STEM degree, you can apply for a 2 year extension. Now, traditionally, like I was telling Anuja, management does not come under STEM, but some management courses, like example, engineering management or MIS courses or business analytics and all that, although they are offered by the business school, some finance courses also, universities have tried to converted them to STEM courses, so that international students get the advantage of this 2 year OPT, additional OPT extension, effectively giving them a 3 year work permit in the US. Uh, but MBA programs, most of them are not STEM. Some universities have started converting their MBA programs by introducing technical courses in the MBA, or some concentrations of the MBA. If you probably choose a finance or a supply chain or maybe an operations or IT related concentration as part of your MBA, you could make it. I mean, those could be considered as STEM. So, if you're looking at a management or a business degree, preferably try for a STEM course, so that you effectively have 3 years to work in the US after your master's before you go on the H1B visa. Um, the traditional route is to go on the H1B visa, but there are also these high skilled visas that US has introduced. Not many are aware of, and not many companies also sponsor those, known as the O visa, which is basically you can try for high skilled visas. Maybe I, I myself honestly am not so much aware of what are the entry criteria or what are the application criteria for those O visas or the other high skilled visas. I'll try to find out, and maybe just for my own knowledge. I can I'll also, so that I can share that information also with not only you guys but also with students who are currently in the US, doing their masters. And then eventually on the H1B visa, effectively you can be there for 6 years, and then after that, in that 6 years, you should at least, your company should file your green card or the PR, and at least get to the stage one of the green card for you to stay there even longer. That is how the trajectory works. Okay. I think someone here had a question about design students. Most design courses, if they are offered by the art school, right, then they don't come under STEM. Um, but design courses that are, again, if you're looking at product design courses, there is also engineering product design, or if you're looking at HCI related courses, that is human computer interaction or interactive design, which are the tech related design courses, which has a strong technology component also to it, those come under STEM. But pure product design courses offered by art schools or arts colleges in the US don't come under STEM. So if you're looking at pure design courses, then you should probably consider whether it is a STEM course or not. If it's not STEM, then it's again your call whether you want to do it. Chances of jobs after these programs are slightly difficult. I mean, I'm not saying it is impossible, but comparatively, it is going to be a little difficult to get a job after a STEM degree. I mean, without a STEM degree, than what you can get with a STEM degree. Yeah, I think any questions on this? I think I'm done with my presentation. So yeah, we'll just. Mhm. Yeah. Hmm. Yes, the job market is bad currently, and I would say not only in the US. In the US, it is most bad. Um, And it's bad in every sector. But what happens is IT and software mein the job market is even bad because generally that is the biggest sector that offers jobs. So if you see traditionally, IT, the maximum jobs are in the software and IT and computer industry. And so when there are less jobs, this is the sector that gets affected the most. Or rather, you have, since the volumes also, the number of students applying for these jobs are also high, you will find a lot of students not getting jobs. So students are struggling. I mean, that is a fact. There is no denying that. Especially students who are graduating now. I mean, probably who went in 2023 or went in 2024. um, 2024 students or 2023 students are finding a little, students of my own students and the others whom I know, students who went in 2023 are definitely finding it a little difficult, in fact a lot more difficult to get internships also in summer. And students who already graduated are also finding it difficult to get jobs. In fact, many are not getting interviews. I mean, the current trend is that if you apply to 100 jobs, maybe five of them might call you for interviews, and maybe one might click. And I mean, if that also happens, I would say that is a very optimistic scenario in today's day and age. So yes, the job market is tough. If I go back to one of my screens, right? Okay, so here, right? So if you look at it, so the OPT what I have put in is 1 year, right? Now, what you also, now this is not, so this 1 year is the OPT that allows you to basically work in the US. But the rule says that within 60 days of your start of your OPT, you should find a job. Okay, so that puts even more pressure. So that if you basically, after you graduate, within 60 days, you should have a job, and then you can work for 1 year. I mean, effectively, you can work for 1 year, but within 60 days, you can have a job. You can't just be unemployed and stay in the US for 1 year. I mean, you can stay, but then after that, you will have to return back to India. There is no other option there. All right. So, if you ask me, is it still advisable to go to the US? I would still say yes, but I would still say keep some other options also open. I mean, all these days, and this is the trend that you see that most of the students are now also applying to UK as an option. And to give you a difference between the UK and the US, why people always prefer the US is because the salaries in the US are comparatively much higher after graduation compared to the UK. Um, but UK or some of these other countries, right, even some of the European countries, they offer slightly more stability. And when I say stability in the sense like what happens in UK today is that after you graduate, you get a 2 year work permit. That 2 year is the time for you to stay in the UK. It is not, there is no, like in the US, you get a 1 year work permit, like the OPT. In UK, you get the 2 year thing. But in US, you have to find a job in 60 days. Whereas in the UK, there is no such restriction. You can stay in the UK for 2 years without a job. After that 2 years, if you don't have a job, obviously you will have to return. But if you find a job, your employer should file your work permit. The criteria for that is that it should be a job in the domain that you have done your bachelor's, oh sorry, master's, and you have, I mean, they have now introduced a minimum salary in the UK of 38,000 pounds. So they should be paying you 38,000 pounds, which is a big number. I mean, I would not say it's a very small salary because average salaries in the UK after graduation are somewhere in the 35 to 45,000 pounds range. Anybody getting a salary in the UK of more than 40,000 pounds is considered as a very good salary. In US, the salaries after graduation go as high as 90 to $100,000 also. So there is a big difference in the amount of salaries that you can earn in the US versus UK. When the markets are good, $100,000 in the US is a very good salary. I mean, it's easy to get that jobs, and so your potential to earn or become financially more stable in the US is much higher than UK. But UK provides a little more stability in the sense that US may, okay, even so, let's assume you get a job, but there is again no guarantee that after 3 years you will get the H1B visa. because again there are too many applications. There is a lottery system. All those things are there. Whereas in UK, if you have a job and you have $38,000 come £38,000 minimum salary, you will definitely get your work visa. So there are no limits, or maybe like in US they still issue only 65,000 visas every year. There are more than 2 lakh applications that come in for those visas. So it's a lottery system. UK, there is no such thing. If the employer files and you have a job and your job is paying more than 38,000 pounds, you will get the work visa. So, but then yes, your salaries will still be low. And when I say they are low, it's not that your salaries are low compared to others in the UK. I mean, UK citizens also get the same amount of salary. But compare if you compare it with another student or maybe a colleague or someone who is in the US, then obviously that might appear to be a low salary. So, if you ask me my recommendation, should you apply to US or should you consider other countries also? I would say keep your options open. Uh, but at some point you will have to take a call, because I mean Canada was once considered to be a great option, but the Canadian government overnight changed some of their policies. Australia is changing their policies, so you never know what countries do. At this point, I would say maybe you might want to apply to one or two universities in the UK also, or maybe some other. If you want to look at Australia, can also be a good option if you have a good profile, right? So that can be something that you can consider. Maybe consider looking at options like say Netherlands. Probably Germany has certain restrictions on who can apply, what language requirements are there. But there are I have a student who went to Denmark uh, for his master's degree. There are not many options. I mean, volumes are less, the number of universities are less, but then they are good options, right? So I would suggest, as a student, like if you ask me, um, should I look at other countries? I would say definitely yes, right? You should keep your options open. Don't put all, and but at some point, maybe March, when you get all your decisions, you will have to take a call whether you should go to US or. But then you still have time. Maybe you probably assess the situation. The job situation might change. Elections are happening in the US. Political situations, visa rules might change. But at some point, there is always a risk involved, because you never know which country can change their rules at what point, and they don't give you a lot of time. I mean, probably intimation that okay, in the next year I'm going to change it. Things happen overnight. So US. Singapore, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I could do that very honestly, but one of the point is I'll see if I can find someone to do that, because I am not an expert in APAC admissions, very honestly. I mean, Australia is still understandable, but if you look at ask me about, and Singapore, if you ask me, I know about admissions to. And see, this is my personal view. If you're going to Singapore, go to only NUS and NTU. There are only two universities I recommend students. I don't really recommend going to any other universities if you're looking at Singapore, and these are very kind of difficult universities to get in. Australia still has some sizable universities, but now Australia has also introduced as Australia is something that you can consider. Maybe we can do something on Australia. Um, but if you ask me about other countries, like say, there are students who are now considering universities in Japan, Hong Kong. Japan can be a good option. I personally am not aware of much about admissions in Japan, but as a student yourself, if you are a student or you're a parent, or I mean all those parents and students in this group today, I would suggest keep your options open. Look at options. Don't go by the mindset that okay, yes. Many times, students go by this mindset that okay, yes, my seniors have gone to the US. I have relatives in the US, so I should also go to the US. Good reasons to go to the US. I'm not saying US is a bad option, but US may not be a fit for everyone, right? It also depends on your budgets, your risk-taking appetite, your technical skills, the subjects that you're studying. right? Because of, like someone was asking me for a design course. Right? Today, if you want to go for a design course, I would still suggest UK, France, Italy would still be good options to go to. Right, right. Yes, if you go to France, you will have to learn French. It's not mandatory, but probably to have a good career, then I would say do that, right? Then if you know that next year you want to go to France, start learning French today. If you know that next year you want to go to Germany, start learning German. You may not go to Germany, but at least you'll know German, right? Knowing a language is not going to harm you anyway, right? So probably just be optimistic and keep your options. Try to explore more. Find out. I mean, if not me, there could be someone else who can guide you on Japanese admissions. Doesn't mean that you just because I don't know about Japan, you should not go to Japan. You could do that. Maybe I could learn from you next year, and you could do a session next year on how to get admissions in Japan. Because that is again coming up as one of the. I mean, in many discussions, students do ask. I read about it in forums about Japanese universities also trying to probably recruit students from across the globe, which was not the case 10 years ago, right? But things are changing now. So, okay. Any other questions? Anybody has any questions? Maybe we'll take one or two more questions. And as I said, few things, connect with us on WhatsApp, LinkedIn. Stay in touch so that any information that I have, I could share it. I generally share it on these forums, on these WhatsApp groups and all that. I'll add you to those groups if you just send me a message saying that add me. Uh, and as I said, if anyone wants a copy of the book, message it or it can be downloaded from the website. Uh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, anything 9 plus is very good, and anything at least 7 plus is, I would say, decent. To get a good, decent university, yes, at least it is not. It's a good score. I mean, with a 7 plus CGP, you can still get a decent university, right? But if your GPA is in the fives or less than 7, then yeah, then yes, you might have to. You can still go. I mean, we have had students with 6 GPAs also have who have gone. Um, so again, there are one thing that traditionally what happens is everybody say if you are a computer engineering student, right? You always try to apply for a computer science program, right? But sometimes you can also consider there are alternate programs that are available which are slightly easier to get in. Like for example, you could try for courses in software engineering, or you could try for courses in information technology, or you could try for specialized courses like say go for a master's in artificial intelligence or data science or something like that, right? So if you're looking at electronics, right? So maybe there are courses in like some universities offer a courses in embedded system kind of thing. Okay, so these courses and all are slightly, maybe the main course of the university is slightly difficult, but sometimes going in for these slightly offbeat course, but still relevant to your topic or relevant to your interest, are sometimes easier. So what happens is that way you can get into a much better university for with a slightly weaker profile also. So that strategy sometimes helps rather than, so for example, if you look at University of Maryland, right, or even if you look at CMU, both of these have a course in telecom which not many students apply to. If you apply to their electrical engineering course or the electronics core electronics electrical engineering, very competitive to get in, but comparatively with much lower profiles, students get into their telecom program or their this thing. Sometimes that helps because that helps you get maybe a brand like CMU on your resume, uh, even if you uh, but maybe yes, you're doing a master's in telecommunications at at that university. Of course, if that is your interest, you could definitely do that. If you're definitely not interested in telecom, then don't do something like that. But sometimes looking at these alternative courses, right, can help you get into a better university as a strategy. Okay. So if there are no more questions, then we'll end today's session and hope to stay in touch with all of you. Okay. Bye.